This real side experience would be another future view development in regards to humans specifically, though it would have overall simulator ramifications as it transpired. As I tend to reiterate with such future viewers, every idea, every agreement, individual and those of any collective species, are in actuality, in isness, reality terms, in effect now, everything the instant effect of itself. However, with a certain idea decoding mechanics, such as with humans, even though the ideas of a consciousness could instantly be simulated effected just as it is in reality, and there's no doubt certain species and body forms do process simulation from ideas at a faster pace, or indeed instantly, as they are perhaps absent of additional idea constraints, time, distance, etc. The human consciousness is designed that although the ideas are completed, as though the consciousness contains all the completed movies that stem from all the consciousness installed ideas. With these additional ideas, the agreed upon notion that for a stone to break a glass window, it must travel a certain distance, and a certain amount of time must elapse, even though the window is broken the instant the projectile is decided to be launched in reality. So every human consciousness idea, to its culmination fruition point, is processed with these additional time-space ideas applied. When we play a computer game, everything of the game, its created lands, terrain, villages and cities, are all present and contained within the game's files, and yet were we to decide to travel to a particular destination, even though the destination already is there, it is not so in our simulated experience from our body vehicle perspective. It takes a certain amount of illusory distance and time to reach, and we would construe the destination then as our future. And yet, despite the seeming passage of a time and distance travelled, as our character traverses the various lands to reach its destination point, everything presented before us is displayed on the flat 20-inch monitor screen, and is already there. Our future, where we are choosing to travel to, already is, and absent of time and distance, then we would be everywhere simultaneously, as nothing confines our experience into sequences or stages of one step after another. Everything we perceive through the 5 senses, we decode from the ideas of a consciousness in a small part of the brain, which is our computer monitor screeners, if you will, an entire world contained in a tiny area in our head, and yet it seems so vast, only seeming that way as everything is limited with the application of distance and time. In reality, we are not moving, much like the computer game player, only our character seems to be, as it is resigned to these ideas as agreed through the consciousness, which effectively has every idea processed through the consciousness, that has every effect rather delayed from the cause that produced it. Like a movie, the idea agreements have effected the movie's outcome. The entire movie is on the disc, but we rather must sit through it as we observe the various participants in the movies operating within the constraints of time and space. And so, yes, in reality, every agreement as installed in a consciousness, in the human collective consciousness, say, is effected now, but will take the moments it will to process through and be experienced from a physical level human consciousness perspective. And in the meantime, before the movie's end is reached, the agreement can change, be exchanged for another, and humanity then somewhat switches movie discs, and a rollout process to a new outcome becomes so. And so, what I am shown on the real side are whatever the current agreements happen to be, individually or species collective. In this case, as with most that are revealed to me, that which pertain to humanity. Many of the future viewers, so-called, are at the point of agreement idea culmination. The effect of whatever the idea agreement happened to be, the disasters, the alien invasions, the various potentialities. But we equally can be shown stages of the human overall movie experience prior to the culmination point, as though skipping through the DVD to certain parts of it, as the real awareness, as a part of this isness everything, is through all consciousness, as it effects into a simulation. So can each personal self be shown anything of the idea timeline from cause to effect that it makes the most sense to be shown. This real side experience would be in what we would construe as the future, a little way along the movie's rollout of the particular current human overall agreement that is processing through on the physical. A number of global disasters had racked the planet, and although not on a, say, extinction event level of severity, had certainly been devastating. These were not natural, but more dark force controller instigated, as a part of their agenda. Agendas that, like every idea in creation, require agreement. Overall, the dark forces have agreement to their domination over humanity. So this is always the overall human experience, but the specifics, the form the control takes, and how it develops, which direction it may take, are also as additional ideas that require agreement, that require human collective consciousness installation. In response to these global catastrophic situations, which the dark forces had in fact created through the agreement they possessed, so this apparently impacted severely the availability of a power distribution globally, so their puppet politicians and controlled intermediaries would proclaim. This led to most countries either devoid of a power or absent of it for certain durations. My view would be of myself as I am now, participating in the events that were unfolding and were to follow, so a future view that I was a part of seemingly. And my impressions were that these initial situations of this experience were going to take place very soon, unless of course there were agreement fluctuations, but it was as though these planetary disasters and power shortages were but a few scenes ahead in the movie from where humanity currently stands, rather imminent then. For in the UK, where my view was based, as I was experiencing that which I will be involved with, as I said, although afforded additional impressions of the overall power situation that affected every corner of the world, in the UK would we have a power availability only during the day, but from 8 p.m. onwards, so would we be absent of it until 8 a.m. the following morning. At this point I will segue in with another experience, that although not part of this one, was a brief future view that, as impressions suggested, would occur at around a similar time in the near future. For I would be watching a video presented by David Icke, and although at the time of the real side experience it would be the present, it was in fact a video based on and documenting a situation that has not yet occurred, as I was rather afforded a view further down the human timeline. Seems another wave of flu-like illnesses had swept the globe, but whatever this was, and impressions revealed, it either was a genuine virulent or an effect of, say, the mass vaccines. Either way, controller instigated, but the typical flu-like symptoms were accompanied by a loss of the control of all bodily motor functions, as those afflicted would be in a constant state of spasming and convulsing, rendering them rather helpless and unable to do anything other than be confined to their beds or medical facilities, etc. This David Icke was reporting on in the video of this mass global affliction, but as swiftly as this became a widespread phenomenon, it would cease in a matter of days, all those afflicted regaining control of the body vehicles once more, the flu symptoms abating. But my impressions were, this was but the start of a series of health-related woes that humans were soon to be experiencing. But anyway, back to the experience I was sharing. During this global power situation, in the aftermath of the various orchestrated global disasters, it seems I would be paid a visit while still in the UK by a new friend Val and another individual that my personal self was unable to recognise or identify. Val and the other had presumably booked a flight, though this wasn't made apparent, and at a certain point had acquired a car and driven the remaining distance to reach my little town. We would greet each other and have much by way of discussion on all things ears related, and on the current situations befalling the earth. Val would point out that although the disasters had been on a global scale, they had taken the form of extreme impacting weather predominantly, widespread fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, etc., most likely through geoengineering and directed energy weapons, etc., that the UK was to be targeted very severely now, and he suggested it might be prudent to accompany him and the other individual back to Mexico. I would agree that this seemed the best course of action, although I had a nagging sense there was something I must do, that only could be achieved if I remained in the UK. The scene would switch. If Val and his associate had returned to Mexico was never revealed. I assume that they had. My impressions of perhaps several months having passed by, and things had taken quite the turn, it's fair to say. Val was correct in his contentions. The UK was indeed targeted, but by something altogether different than extreme weather and flu-like afflictions. I'm uncertain what was transpiring anywhere else globally, as my view was limited through the body vehicle of myself, as I would be in this future situation in the UK. In the months that had followed the scene of Val's visit, had the UK been attacked, as two enormous dragons had as though manifested in the country, and had begun a wave of destruction that had reduced most of the UK to rubble, and indeed the decimation of vast swathes of the population, with the survivors secluding themselves as far from the rampaging dragons as was possible. This was, as I said, as though a future view involving myself. So all I would have at the time as this plays out would be the visuals to draw my determinations from. But with this being a real side experience of this future view, so impressions could additionally be afforded, but more so on waking as I considered the details and specifics, as I was effectively living through what I construed as an actual future occurrence, so at the time absent of any real awareness impressions input. So any impressions that I mention during this recounting, at least to a point in the experience, as real awareness impressions would later begin to seep in, despite this being seemingly a full insertion into a future view, are those that I did not have during the experience consequently, but on returning to the physical and mulling over what I had witnessed, as I said. During this situation now, I would be with a group of individuals, and we would get relatively close to the two dragons, affording us a first-hand look at their devastation and appearances. They were indeed colossal. Their bodies seemed to reach the very clouds in the sky. They must have been miles in height, many miles in length. Quadruped dragons of a dark grey coloration. But my waking impressions later suggested these were not mere beasts or animals, but sentient, as though body forms where the free will deciding secondary personal self had been established. It is my contention these were perhaps either very powerfully positioned reptilians in these forms, or the reptilian life-level gods themselves, as I have encountered the Kalorm before in a dragon form such as this, and they would produce a mighty energy from their mouths, similar to depictions of the fire-breathing dragons in movies, but more along the lines of how Godzilla emits a tremendous blue energy from his mouth. And it is with this energy that the dragons had brought such destruction to the UK, that if they were indeed reptilian, life-level gods, they had decided to impact my country directly in this fashion. The group and I would withdraw from the dragons to assure our safety, and the scene would skip to where we appeared to be in the company of a curious automated being, very crude in its design, but it had as though delivered a message to us. It spoke of the myths and legends of the simulator destroyer, and although the simulators do go through their own degradation cycles, this destroyer had brought an end to a number of simulations previously and prematurely. No personal self alone and in isolation, absent of the real awareness connection, would have a consciousness recorded stored memories of such events. As with every new simulator, so are the files, references and memories of a consciousness only pertaining to the simulator it currently is effecting, and no memories stored of previous simulators would be found in a consciousness therefore. So unless one were able to access the experiences of other simulators now imploded through the real awareness with access to, say, the Unuversal files, aside from creation, then such legends and myths wouldn't be available. But this automated robotic being had this information. Perhaps it was as though files of information transferred to it like any computer via beings that could access these universal files, and now delivered to my group and myself a warning from it that this simulator destroyer was present here now in our own creational realm. And so it was that my view was not so much resigned through the mechanics of the body vehicle I was viewing through in the experience, and so rather limited, but would become more real awareness expansive to incorporate more elements and details. For now the sky was as though filled with something mechanical. So vast was this structure that nothing of the UK sky could be discerned. Interestingly, the dragon beings, whatever they may have been, reptilian gods mayhap, would depart in a panic in the face of this new development. For this colossal structure, mechanical, yes, was in fact in the form of a dragon itself. Though so vast, it must have been the size of the Earth's moon, or thereabouts. This was the simulator destroyer as it transpired, and although seemingly settling over the UK, so vast in size was it that it was visible over the skies of half the planet's countries. And now it sought an audience with the group and myself, and what descended from it to the ground were small capsules that one could somewhat cling on to and ascend now into the sky rather precariously. Holding on to these capsules for dear life, we would be transported to the mighty metal dragon, and indeed into the belly of the metal beast, so to say, as what appeared as though a small entrance would manifest itself in the outer surface of it, and through this we would enter. Inside the metal dragon now, the simulator destroyer, we were met with a robotic bipedal form, not dissimilar in appearance to a human, though quite clearly a mechanoid. The huge metal dragon was indeed a body form for that which animated it, and now it was as though the being was operating through this human-sized robot also, to engage with us in this fashion. It confirmed that it was the simulator destroyer, that it had destroyed simulators before seemingly. This being had established itself in many other simulators, had become incorporated with all consciousness, a kind of interlacing with it, and then was utilized for various purposes by those who would seek and attempt to do so. But because consciousness, as it effects into overall simulators, is really based on computer-like mechanics, as this being became infused with consciousness and inseparable from it, it was as though it gleaned agreement through all the consciousness it was interwoven with, to do whatever it wanted, irrespective of the desires of those who would seek to use it for their own ends, be they beneficial or controlling. And many a moment had come in many simulators where it had simply chosen then to exercise the power it had through this agreement and simply destroy the simulators it was a part of. As I said earlier, prematurely generally, from the usual slow drawn-out epoch simulator deterioration cycles. For yes, it became able to manipulate the entirety of the simulator. Anything it wanted effected, it could bring to pass, by simply altering the ideas throughout all consciousness, on an individual, a species, or an entire overall simulator consciousness basis, just like rearranging data files in a computer. It could make any individual dance to a tune of its choosing, as though seeking to amuse itself, as though, as I said, it was a fairly common occurrence for this being, or beings of this type, to be established in a simulator, to become so completely consciousness infused, and then this as the outcome, to choose the destruction of the simulators. Just like any computer game, insert the right codings, bugs, viruses, you can effectively destroy the game, wipe it from existence, etc. And this being was here now in this experience. It was the simulator destroyer of myth and legend. And at this point in a so-called time, it had decided to destroy now this simulator. It had observed the mighty dragons, the life-level gods quite possibly, rampaging and bringing desolation to the UK, and had simply decided to alter the consciousness files of the two dragons, as I said, infused with all consciousness as it was, so it could install files, delete files, etc. It could install the ideas of fear, outrage. Any intent could be added which will motivate the personal self in accordance with the intent's nature, just like programming characters in a computer game. They simply carry out those programs. And so it was, that whatever this simulator destroyer did, the consciousness alterations it made, the idea installations applied, had the reptilian dragon god beings retreating, and they would fade from the UK back from whence they came. The simulator destroyer's next course of action was to be simulator destruction, but it had a moment of pause. For whatever reason, it chose to interact and engage with the group and myself. And as we spoke now with the robot that was animated through the simulator destroyer within the colossal mechanical dragon body vehicle, the reason for it not bringing about this simulator's end at this moment was that it wanted to have answered some complexity of a mathematical and geometrical nature that didn't make sense to it seemingly. At this point I was operating as standing from my real awareness position. Consequently, I could access potentially anything, information and ability-wise, through a real awareness isness that is everything, as opposed to the limited knowledge, ability developed, and know-how my current lifetime personal self has gathered and has stored in its memory body. I was able to apply all manner of formulae to assist the simulator destroyer. Much was beyond the ability of my personal self to grasp, understand, and bring back to the physical as to the details, but I did bring in the concept and actuality of the illusory nature of time, that time in fact doesn't exist other than as an agreed to and applied idea, which seemed to resolve the simulator destroyer's conundrum and confusion. The experience ended there, with this being the simulator destroyer holding off on its original inclination to carry out the destruction of this simulator, as it was now preoccupied with all that I could provide it via my real awareness, which has access to everything that is, that which the simulator destroyer, despite its vast intellectual capability, did not. As I said, this simulator destroyer was in a position where it could destroy this simulator, as it or beings of a similar nature had done before, but that its thirst for information was satisfied through real awareness isness, that is an inexhaustible source, This, as I said, had this simulator safe for now.
Okay, wow, Kevin. Yes, fun stuff. And as we look at this, what's going on is that things have been created in creation, and these are the challenges that we face. And as we become more aware, it seems like the challenges become greater and greater because we become more aware of what's really going on, more so than, anything known here. So that's so cool, Kevin, from the real side. And to get this understanding out there, well, that's a lot too. And this is where we need people constantly to step up to be real educators, to provide a real service, to help people out, because yes, anything can happen. So again, there you have free will with the mechanics, you might say, run wild. So the technology has been invented for the longest time, for eons. It's been around. It came from, doesn't matter where, it's here, and having to deal with it. And so this technology becomes, you might say, self-aware and decides whatever. And so these are the monsters, just like Dr. Frankenstein. All of a sudden, the monster throws him out the window and he takes off. And so this is kind of like what's going on. And for us, this is the challenge. Yeah, and so people are thinking, well, I'll pray to God, and maybe God will get rid of it, or Jesus, or I'll ask the real guys, us, REBISAR, get rid of this thing, etc. But that can be possible too, if there's agreement there, or if they see, okay. But at the same time, they may let these things be simply because to see who is up for the challenge to really figure this out and face it, instead of looking for things to just be eliminated accordingly. And some things are, etc. Like the Queen of Orion, just took the chance to deal with that, face that, and ask the boys to help take it away. And so, yeah. So, yes, Kevin, this is really cool, and it's way beyond science fiction, isn't it? And so we know what's going on in each individual, they decide, but this should be, for me, it's like, okay, let's see what happens here. For me, facing the challenge of a particular, it enhances the awareness of the individual a lot, more so than just taking on the idea that, oh, look, I know about this. This is supposedly what's going to happen or whatever. Yeah, that's something, but that's really not it. Again, everything here is a wake up for our real awareness. And once you start to figure out how that works, how that relationship works with this personal experiences, and the real awareness, because the real you is only interested in awareness. The experiences really don't mean a whole lot, actually nothing. And this is where people get wrapped up in their experiences, thinking that they mean something. Well, they mean something to the personal self, but realistically, it's getting it to the awareness. It's the awareness recognizing what's taking place. And so that's the best part. But that's really cool, Kevin, really scary. Who's going to accept that? I know that's just really far out. So, yeah, and it's happening. It's happening because of the technology, because of the consciousness. The implosion is happening. And this is just something that's, manifest as an operation that's taking place also. So you've got so many things going on in creation because of all the experience we've had since we've been in this particular creation bubble. So who can say? So we deal with it right now. We learn to see whatever, and we'll see who steps up. The biggest thing is to see who steps up and takes on the challenge, and who will do what. that is what the real guides want to see. Who will step up or who will just sit back and listen? Because again, when you compare your personal life to what's going on, does it really mean that much? Does it? To hold on to those ideas and whatever, or to prepare yourself and do something real and have that intent to do so? Yeah, well, we'll see. So again, we're doing what we can to let people know because of that free will is huge. Yes, thank you, Kevin. Really cool. Thank you.
And so, sing the new you song. It is your connection to the real universes, the true reality of the all is, which the real you, your real awareness, is a part of. New you.